start?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
This is another one of your baby topics. Arousal in dogs, right?
Yeah, I'm specifically thinking in arousal.
Yeah, it's like a really hot topic right now. Well, maybe for the last few years. I don't know where to start with it because I don't know. I have a feeling you might want to approach this from a different angle than the one that I think of. But one of arousal for me became a bit of a poison term for a while because it was like it felt like there were a lot of behaviorists out there that were like over arousal. Like,
yeah.
You don't play ball with your dog. Don't do anything with them, you know? And it's like so it started to become a word that, you know, you'd hear people talk about over arousal and you kind of be like, oh God, like really? You know?
Yeah. Actually, you know, like I'm maybe let's put it this way, that I had a client that they were told, you know, like not to play with the dog, not to get the dog excited, not to, you know, like that arousal was like very explained them in very negative way. And that kind of made me think about that, you know, what life is if you are not getting excited about anything. But also it's like such a crazy expectation from the dog not to be aroused at any point in life. But also if you look at the training, like vast majority of things that I see are to calm down the dog, right? Like all the strategies, right? Something like in the training menu is like how we can calm down the dog in specific context. But like very few information we have about like how we can actually teach the dog to think in arousal. Because the dog will get excited at some point, like that's for sure, right? And if you are basing like our game only in making the dog calmer, this is where we gonna fail, because at some point the dog will get excited and then whatever you did before, it's not applicable. However, teaching the dog to think in arousal and solve problems in arousal, that for me seems like more sustainable strategy. So that would be like whatever I'm dealing with, or like let's put it like, that might be over arousal in specific like situations. That can be fear, that can be whatever, you know, the problem I have or behavioral challenge that I have. The first thing I will go with is to teach the dog to think in that mindset, and then I can work to bring the arousal down or make the dog calmer, etc., right? Because like if my dog will be able to think in arousal, then I can live life. I can, you know, I can solve the problems, right? And then I've got the time to address the feelings, because we are delusional if we think that we can change the feelings in a very quick way. It takes a lot of time, right? To bring, you know, for example, the arousal can come from negative feelings. The dog is, for example, scared of something, right? And to change those feelings from negative to neutral or positive even is going to take a lot of time, right? But if you teach the dog to problem solve or think in those specific scenarios, like when the arousal is shooting like up to the sky, you can start living life, and then you have like all the time in the world to work on, you know, make the dog calmer.
Yeah, I think that kind of gets to the point where there are like two ways of dealing with this level of arousal. One is, as you said, to teach the dog to be able to think in arousal, to be able to even regulate their own arousal better. And then you have a different approach, which is like to try to eliminate arousal from the dog's life, which to me, like ironically, because I think a lot of the people that are drawn to that approach see themselves as being very welfare based. But to me, that's a really like, that really sacrifices the dog's welfare, because you're just like your approach to dealing with the problem is just to make the dog's life as boring as possible, which is like really not very, like, I don't think that's a very ethical approach. And it's funny because, you know, there are people that have spoken out about this. I remember reading a fantastic article by Jean Donaldson, actually, that she wrote a great thing, which was, I wish I knew the title so people could find it. Well, I'm sure if you just type in like Jean Donaldson Arousal, or maybe we can put it on the show notes or whatever. She wrote a fantastic article, which was basically like criticizing this approach of just like depriving the dog of, just like the obsession with arousal.
Yeah.
And, trying to make the dog's life boring as a way of dealing with that.
Yeah, but like if you will take all the exciting things from the dog's life, you're not gonna play, you're not gonna, and so on and so on. What are the odds that the dog will become frustrated, and then you have that, arousal coming out of frustration? Because like if actually like the spike of arousal or higher level of arousal, they can come from different sources, right? Different emotional systems. Like Jak Panksepp, he was talking about emotional systems, right? And there is like some mention in, I got the like very cool book, very young author. So we have 7 emotional systems, right? We have desire, rage, fear, care, lust, panic, and play, right? And from all of those, we maybe accept the care. Like we can, like the dog can get like excited or overexcited, right? So let's say we will eliminate play. Okay, we don't play with the dog. So what are the odds that the dog will, become like heavily frustrated and will go into the rage, and that will, recompensate like not playing with the dog. So I don't think it's not only ethical, it's also not sustainable, and we are delusional that we can keep the dog calm and never experience like excited dog. Like that doesn't make any sense for me.
For people that are listening to the audio version, Alex is referencing his own book. So go check out Alex's book as well. But I think this line of thinking came from, for me, the obsession with cortisol. Which is like a chemical that gets released with stress, but it gets released with eustress and distress, right? Which is like sometimes people call good stress or bad stress. And like then we had the ideas of like trigger stacking, where it's like, the stress accumulates essentially, and then that's where you start to get reactions and dog bites, etc., etc. And because cortisol was released from good stress as well, so like throwing the ball, etc., and we had this obsession with trigger stacking cortisol. It's like the place that people go is like, well, okay, I need to eliminate as much cortisol as possible, so I'm just going to stop the dog from experiencing even the good stress, which is the ball throwing, the tug, the play, all of that kind of stuff, in an effort to like minimalize cortisol. But that's just so like not seeing the forest for the trees kind of thing. It's like, it's not seeing the whole picture to take all of the fun out of the dog's life in an effort to try to like minimalize cortisol just doesn't really make sense. It's really interesting. I was speaking to a client of mine that was a personal trainer. I don't really know much about that world, but he was saying, he was kind of like one of those clients you get that's actually quite interested. So like he kind of wanted to know and kind of get into like the weeds of like the theories and all this kind of stuff. And we ended up talking about this, and he like, as soon as I mentioned cortisol, before I even said anything, he was almost rolling his eyes and was like, oh yeah, we've had this in personal training where like people have become obsessed with cortisol. And
all right.
So
in a negative way, I assume.
I don't know if it's like, I have no idea. It's not really I don't know if it's inhibiting muscle growth, or I don't know, right? Like, but he was saying like they had the whole thing in personal training where people became very obsessed with cortisol, and he kind of had a like eye roll moment of like, oh yeah, we've been there.
Yeah, there are those trends, and like we in doctoring industry or in any industry, there are like some waves that people are getting obsessed over one thing, and then it's very trendy, but we forget to look at the whole picture, right? And as you mentioned, like just before, like the cortisol has very negative connotation, frustration has very negative connotation, stress has very negative connotation, where all of those things are part of life and healthy life, right? Stress is not bad, chronic stress is bad, right? Frustration can get you in trouble, but you can use it to work in your favor. The same with anything else, right? We can just accept the fact that this is part of life and then act accordingly.
Yeah. Oh, so that's kind of, I feel like that kind of gives a little brief overview of like the situation
Yeah.
or like how people tend to like think about arousal and cortisol and all the stress and all this kind of stuff happens. I guess probably if people are listening to this, they want to know like, okay, how do I have this dog in front of me that doesn't think in arousal or seems to get aroused very, very quickly. Like, what do I do?
So, like the difference is that you can, just to explain or give kind of like idea what is thinking in arousal. Let's say you are driving car very, very fast, right? And you can be like laser focused on the driving, or you can have like panic attack or meltdown, or, stop thinking and just like hectically reacting. Arguably, in both scenarios, you could have like similar levels of arousal, right? Or the arousal will be on the similar levels. But the, behavior, or even if it goes from mindset, is drastically different. One is focused and focus on the task, and another one is just like meltdown, hectic. So what we wanna, if we have the dog that is just like not dealing well with arousal because never was taught how to think in arousal, we wanna bring the skills or ability to think and problem solve. The same like with the driving, right? You wanna be like, when you're driving very, very fast, you just wanna be laser focused on the job, right? And then, even to go with that example a little bit further, like there are those drivers that they have like the guy next to them that giving them instructions. Yeah. How crazy that is.
The rally driving.
Yeah. Like, so the guy is driving like super fast and then hearing the instruction. So we want to have like a dog like that. That will be, okay, there will be times when the dog will get like very excited about, or highly aroused about whatever that will be, right? And we want the dog to act accordingly to our instructions.
I'm just thinking, you would be fucking shit at that, Alex, because every time we drive, and anyway, if you're in my car and we're driving anywhere, literally just as I'm about to pass a turn, you go, "Oh, left turn here."
I'm not saying I would be good at this job. Right? Because like we are driving on the, like from my house to like from podcasting usually to the training field. And that's why at the end of every podcast, we are saying, oh, okay, let's go train dogs. And I know the way, right? And it's, I don't really think about left, right. I will go there normally with my car and I don't even know how I got here, right? Yeah.
But I agree. I think like clarity is an important element to it. And that, I think a lot of that is to do with the frustration element, right? I don't know. I think probably the large majority of people, when they talk about arousal, oftentimes there's a big element of frustration, Yeah.
So sorry to interrupt you. Like, one is frustration, like that is very common. Another one is fear, in my opinion, right? Of course, you have like lust, sexual drive that, hard to deal with that. Beside like chopping, like neutering the dog. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that fear and frustration are the most common.
Well, you say that about neutering the dog,
but also you have that rage that would, all the aggression.
But right? I mean, how many people in dog sports, they have to teach the dog to work around bitches in season and all this kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's possible. It's doable.
Yeah.
Right? It is.
It's just another challenge.
Yeah, just another challenge.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can go through some of these like motivations then. Because for like frustration, I always think about frustration in terms of the dog. Like sometimes because I've been writing stuff recently, and I tend to like think of it as like the unmet expectation of reinforcement.
Yep.
Like the dog isn't getting the reinforcement that they're expecting to get. So if you have a dog that's like frustration reactive to dogs, they have an expectation that they're going to go and be able to see that dog. And when they're not able to get that reinforcement, they start getting really frustrated and really aroused as well,
Yeah, like so. Let's talk about frustration. Again, in some circles of trainers or behaviors, that has a very bad connotation, I think. And I mentioned that I'm sure before that. Look what gets you in trouble and use it in your favor. If your dog is getting frustrated about anything and you cannot deal with that, then use frustration to work in your favor. And I think like there are like two types of frustration, right? Because I've heard like someone on Instagram, like some trainer said like, oh, frustration is just an energy, which I disagree with. Like we can have like good energy or good frustration and bad frustration. Going back to our example about driving, right? Let's say your expectations are not met. You are late somewhere or you are hungry and there is nothing in the fridge. So you jump into the car and you are driving. And you are frustrated because like you are hungry or you want to get somewhere fast. But you can be, again, laser focused on the driving. So you feel capable of solving the problem. And then there is a frustration, but also you have the skill or you know how to get the solution, right? And the same situation, but you are standing like in traffic. You will be frustrated as well, but you feel helpless, right? And those two mindsets will be dramatically different. So what I want, like with dogs, I want to equip them with skills, right? Or with solutions to their problems, right? And that really helps. So the dog will get excited, will be like frustrated, but also knows how to get what they want. For example, let's say I've heard some example about the heel work and frustration, right? So you can use the frustration to get a little bit more power in heel work, right? But the dog, like in the healing position, should feel very good. Like this is the good place. So, for example, I can put the dog on the harness way and tease with the toy, like build up the drive. And like this is frustration using a missus, right? The dog is, getting frustrated. I want that ball. But when the dog is going to the healing position, that should be a happy place because like that gives me what I want, right? So I can use the frustration to add power to the heel work, but also the dog has to be very confident in that behavior. However, if the dog is whining in the heel work, that means the dog has no really the faith that behavior leads to the reward, right? And getting frustrated in the behavior. And those are those nuances that in training are very often missed. And if you look at what benefits we can get from frustration and what negative sides of frustration are.
Yeah, I guess probably when I'm dealing with frustration most in my training, because I do a lot of reactivity stuff, so it's mostly frustration reactive dogs. There are a few things that I think are interesting for us to talk about. Firstly, I think sometimes when you have frustration, the reinforcement doesn't always have to be the reinforcement that the dog wants.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it can be, and that's cool,
Mm-hmm.
In fact, maybe it's even preferable at times. But like, if you have a dog that's really frustration reactive and you're at a reasonable distance, obviously if you're right in front of the dog, maybe this isn't going to work, but you're presenting other options for reinforcement, oftentimes that has some degree of working, because like the dog's still getting some level of reinforcement, whether that's food, toys, etc. Also, I think sometimes you can change the dog's emotional state in the way you deliver the reward, which you can manipulate as well. I think sometimes it's very helpful. This is also nuanced because I feel like, this is where talking about dog training is difficult because you need, like, it's so independent to this particular dog. But one of the things that we do quite a lot if the dog is getting quite stressy is reinforce with treats on the ground, which I think has become a little bit like, it's become a little bit of a, what do you call it? Like it's something that gets taken the piss out of a lot, But
yeah,
actually,
I'm in that group.
actually, honestly, it can. I mean, you want really as much as possible. You want to make it contingent on the behavior you want. But I notice a big difference with that.
Okay. It's like, for me, it's very simple math, right? So I can use rewards from the environment. So I had Malinois that he loved to chase foxes, and I lived in London next to the park was next to the hospital, and then there was like a ton of foxes over there. So I was asking him for hill work and do stuff for me, and then I let him to chase the foxes for a couple of seconds, and I was calling him back, right? So the reward was coming from the environment. With the frustration, for example, to dogs, it's not always feasible to give the dog what the dog wants, right? And then if the level of the reinforcement is, you have like massive imbalance over here, the dog may be disappointed, right? So there will be dogs that are, okay, I'm happy with the treats, right? And maybe if you will drop them on the ground, the dog will come down over time. I'm not saying that's not going to work, but also there will be a group of dogs that they will be like, fuck you, I'm disappointed. Like, I don't want that. Right, especially with the higher level of arousal, where digestive system doesn't really work that well, right?
Yeah, but I hate that in some ways, because I think sometimes this is where I think sometimes there's an ideology of like, oh, well, this wouldn't work with a Malinois, so it's fucking useless. It's it doesn't. The majority of dogs are not like that,
okay. It's not like, I will use it, but it's not my favorite way. And let's go back to the topic. So,
let me finish the thought, because I feel like I didn't really talk about that very much. But like, when there are a few reasons that I think that works. Firstly, I think a lot of dogs find using the nose not only like reinforcing but calming, right? So if you have a dog that's, maybe the dog's got a little frustrated, you bring them away, you get like a sit, or the dog looks at you or whatever, you toss the treats on the ground. They have a natural way of calming themselves down. You see this in displacement behavior. When the dog gets stressed, what's one of the first things a lot of dogs do? They start sniffing stuff, right? It's the same. And you're basically just encouraging the dog to do something that they find naturally quite calming anyway. Yes, it's not going to work if you have a dog that's super, super frustrated, or, it's not going to work in the more extreme situations, but it works a lot for a lot of pet dogs. I mean, I'm not saying it's like, oh, just throw some treats on the ground and you're sorted. Okay. It's like, but part of, as a strategy, it's not a solution, it's part of dealing with a bad situation, and you can still make it contingent on the behaviors you want, and as a reward. I think that there is merit to it.
Okay. I'm not saying that is not working. I'm sure that is. Maybe I'm not seeing those dogs, because like vast majority of my clients for reactivity, they've been at like 2 5 behaviorists and trainers, etc., and that didn't work, right? So maybe I'm like heavily biased because I'm not seeing those dogs that it would work, right? But also, like if we are tossing those treats on the ground, we want to basically calm down the dog, right? And I don't have like any problem with that. However, like my first way to go is like teach the dog, before I will calm down the dog, teach the dog to think in that mindset, right? And for example, if the dog is frustrated because like he wants to play so badly, I will use frustration to build passion for something what I have. And it can come from me, right? So we tend to say, okay, I will give the dog a food, or I will play with the dog just to redirect the dog, or like fulfill that need, right? However, for that to make sense, we have to build ideally similar passion for the game. And I will use a lot of restraint, I will use a lot of frustration to build passion for a play. Right. So then if those, and then, like if my dog has like a lot of passion for the play, and then I can kind of match that, levels of reinforcement, right? So the dog wants to play with the other dogs, but wants to also play with me. And, ideally in perfect world, we would like that to be, even, or even that play to be more valuable. So I not only can redirect my dog effectively and the dog will not be disappointed, but also I can practice a lot impulse control around the toys, like in the play, and I can teach the dog to kind of work with me and think in that mindset, right? So like the best example is control around the helper. The dog is like, we build that passion for the biting and so on. And then, like depends how you train, then the dog can be doing like guarding, so that we are going into more, let's say, the like arousal coming from aggression, right? And then you practice control around that. But even like this is the example. But let's say you managed to build a lot of passion by using frustration to the play, and then you can drill repetitions, because like the toys are always with you. You can control access to it. You have like that perfect scenario when you can do as many repetitions as you want in fully controlled scenario, because you can control the toy. Like we're working around other dogs or animals or whatever, it's much harder because you have to control the distance, and very often like this dog is way too close and is not responding to you and we are losing it, right? So building that passion for a game will be like my first line of action. And if my dog can think in that mindset, right, then I will be bringing the arousal down and calming the dog down, for example, around the other dogs.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just, I think this is where you adjust to the individual in front of you.
Oh, yeah.
You can use the dropping of the treat into the grass. Doesn't even have to be a scat, it can just be one treat, as part of the reinforcement strategy for look at me, or even TBBR, right?
Yeah.
Right?
TBRR.
I like it because it does a few things. In your reactivity training style that I'm just stealing and experimenting with. It does a few things.
You have to get the certificate first.
You have to make the course first. Firstly,
on the way, along with the other shit.
Okay. Firstly, it sets me up for the next rep, right? Because let's say I've got the sit. Say we're using like the sit as the behavior, right? And maybe I'm misunderstanding your system, but like I can toss the treat onto the ground. The dog's no longer sitting. They've taken the reinforcement. I think there's a calming effect from them looking for it. We get an opportunity to reset, then we're ready to go again. The other thing I like about throwing the treat into the grass as well is, so you've got the calming element, you've got the fact that we're resetting if we're doing some kind of like contingent behavior. And then also I can actually use it to break distance down in a way that seems a little more subtle. So, like let's say I'm working my dog next to me, the trigger's out there, we've got 3 or 4 successful reps. I can toss the treat half a meter in front of me. The dog goes forwards and we continue to work. And there just seems to be something more subtle about that breaking down of distance, which I always find to be quite effective.
I would do the same, but I would make the dog like mad crazy for food, right? Or like even I would use a lot of like build a lot of drive around the food, and of course not with every single dog is the way we want to go, because like with my dogs I want them to be like super hyper about the food, right? I don't use food like really to calm them down necessarily, right? So but yeah, like in order to do that, like we have to be very good at playing, regardless if it's with the food or with the toy. And there is something that I said some time ago, that the play is like sex in some ways.
Whoa.
Listen, like everybody wants to do it. Very few people learn anything how to do it or how to be good at it. And if something is going wrong, we blame the other side. So like you will ask dog owners, dog trainers, everybody wants to play with the dog. Everybody wants to do it. They want to go straight away to it, right? Like very few people, they actually, decided, hey, maybe I will learn how to do it properly, right? How maybe I should develop some mechanical skills. Maybe I should have like a little bit more understanding of the nature of the game, right? Regardless if it's really food or toys. But very often what is happening, they people are giving the dog a toy and then he doesn't want the toy. Like he doesn't like toys, right? So if anything is going wrong, you blame the other side. Like, oh, the dog doesn't want to play, right? Instead of thinking, maybe I should look in the mirror and then develop some skills. Right?
Yeah, I know. I just I think that there are dogs where this takes, and 100% can be part of the system, but sometimes there's a pressure to get results quickly, and that works very well with a lot of dogs. But let's say you have some Romanian dog that's already has a baseline of stress from being outdoors.
Oh, yeah.
I've got one at the moment. I mean, really severe case. Wouldn't take food, wouldn't take toys outside for months.
Tell me about severe cases. But right now we are leaning a little bit more on fear, right? Or this type of stress, which is, I think, is dramatically different than just frustration because the dog wants to play and has too much drive and.
Oh yeah, that's
right?
okay. That's a really good point. Maybe we're talking past each other a little bit.
Yeah. Because I just focus on that frustration reactivity where we have that frustrated player kind of dog. But speaking about the fear, it's kind of different thing, right? I would approach fear maybe not totally different because I want the dog to instead of teach the dog to like the thing or be calmer around the thing, right? I prefer confidence training.
I saw you post about this recently, and I like the way you think about it. Whereas in terms of sometimes I think the goal is wrong, at least the initial goal. Sometimes people, they're very focused on, let's get this dog social with other dogs. And I think that there's a lot to be said about at least an initial goal. I mean, maybe you go further depending on the dog, but the initial goal of, I just want you to feel safe around dogs. And part of that is understanding that I'm not going to let the dog run up to you. I'm here to protect you from that. You don't have to go into all of the reacting.
Yeah. Hang on. I will close the window because we are freezing to death, and we will go back to that subject because it's super exciting. Okay.
These Polish people, they're so wimpy about the cold.
I know. If you see someone that is dramatically overdressed to the weather, there are high chances that person is from Poland.
Really?
Yeah, it's kind of we were raised in the way I think at least in my generation, my parents, they were overdressing children because they didn't want them to get sick, and that was kind of the thing that I.
It's a funny contrast because a couple of weeks ago we were training at the field, and it was literal thunder and lightning, and obviously super heavy rain. And I was like, "Are we stopping now?"
Oh yeah, you were like, "Oh, it's not safe," and I'm like. What the fuck are you talking about?
I'm not talking about a little bit of rain. I'm talking about literal thunder and lightning, heavy rain. It's
and one of the person that trains with us, they cancelled.
Yeah.
Because it's raining. There was thunder.
To be fair, I don't blame them on that day. It was really, really bad, and we were in the middle of a bite work session.
I know.
I was actually quite surprised that she didn't seem to register it too much. Because it was literal, it was it was pretty loud.
I know, you noticed that. You were the only person that noticed. Dog didn't mind, I didn't mind, we were soaking wet, but
I think when they're doing the bite work, they're just so, it's the best thing ever, right?
It can be raining on the competition, right?
Yeah.
But coming back to the arousal thing, where did we stop with the confidence thing?
Oh yeah, right? Building confidence, having the dog understand that they're safe, right?
Yeah.
This I've been thinking about this a lot because I think sometimes there's an excuse that happens when you have a health problem with a dog. Where people kind of go, he's got a bad back, that's why he's reactive, I can't do anything about it. But you can kind of, with this line of thinking is like, well, look, I totally empathy for the fact the dog has some pain, but there's no reason that he can't understand that, look, he's safe. And why wouldn't we want the dog to understand, hey, you're like, okay, we're not going to go and socialize him with the young golden retriever, but like, you're safe. Like, hang out here. You don't need to be, because the reaction is really, when it comes down, if we're talking about fear of being jumped on or whatever, like that comes down from the dog's lack of comfort with the situation. If we can make them feel more comfortable, then the fact that they've got a bad back or whatever is not so relevant.
So if it goes for, confidence in general, like I posted like some time ago that you're not going to build confidence by feeding your dog more cookies, right?
You have to throw them on the floor.
If you look at definition of the confidence, is the faith in your own abilities or skills or someone's abilities or skills and ability to predict the outcomes, right? This is like roughly a definition of the confidence. And what we are trying to do with something what we commonly call confidence training is teaching the dog to like the trigger.
Or at least go from negative to neutral.
Yeah.
Right? At the very least.
At the very least.
Yeah.
By definition, it's not a confidence training. Because let's say,
That's
if
a very
your dog,
interesting way of...
if you look at human world, right? What we are calling confidence. Let's say you are having confidence in driving, right? Because you are a skilled driver. It's not like you've been in the car long enough, but you have the skill and the confidence comes from skill. The same, fighters, the same firefighters, the same like surgeons, right? To name the few, right?
Have you thought...
Like we call them like confident, but it's coming from the skills. It's not coming from liking the fire. Etc., etc. So the same with the dogs, like something what we commonly call like confidence training, which is usually the mixture of exposure training / counter conditioning. In my dictionary, is not really a confidence by definition. What I perceive as confidence training is teaching the dog, equipping the dog in skills that will solve the dog's problems, or I can solve the dog's problems. Right?
You need a fancy definition of confidence. Have you got one? If we're going to sell this, we need a...
Wasn't like the one that I said wasn't fancy enough.
No, you need a one-liner.
One-liner. Okay, like that is hard. You always want something to squeeze like complex topic into one.
That's do you know what? I've never thought about it like that. And that's such an interesting way of framing it, for sure. And like, yeah, that's really interesting.
Because like if I'm training fear reactive dog, right? My first line of action is not to teach not to bring this arousal down, right? Because this is what we want to do with the exposure and counter conditioning training. And like in my opinion, we are limiting ourselves in way how we train the dogs, and it's like very often it's just hard. It's just hard. Like I know that's gonna work for like certain amount of dogs, but I've been training reactive dogs in residential setup for the last, let's say, 10 years or more. And it would be even like my life was dedicated to, to bring the management and, like to learn, to test, to do all the things. And I would really find like that very difficult to, for example, manage the distance, and try to bring that arousal down. Because like every single time the dog will get scared, every negative experience you have to recompensate with like number or like huge number of the positive, right? So let's say I'm doing my exposure counter conditioning protocol, I'm staying away from dogs, I'm waking, at 4 a.m., whatever, right? Like if my dog will get scared because like something will jump out of the corner, then like those feelings, like whatever I did, that's gonna be like going into the bin.
How is that? Well, I guess my question is like, that is definitely a struggle. Like I think that's why I really like doing the setups, the practical setups early in the training. And we can get into a whole nother thing about trainers that don't do that, because I think that's absolutely crazy. But I'm just, how is that different with your approach? How are you less reliant on?
So I really don't care at the beginning if the dog that I train starts liking other dogs. If you look, what the dog wants is relief or a distance, right? So if I will equip my dog with the skill that if you do whatever I'm asking you to do, like we're gonna solve your problems, right? Like my relationship with the dog will go to another level, but also I don't care about like my dog liking the dog. I'm just showing him solutions to his problems.
How do you solve the problem?
So for example, like if I tend to say, I signed the contract with the dog that if you are next to me or you doing what I'm asking you to do, nothing will touch you. Why the physical contact is very important? Because there is a line between reactivity and retaliation. And I think I posted that very recently, which is like the line between reactivity and retaliation is physical contact, right? So if kind of to train my dog in clear way and fair way, I'm teaching my dog, like, if it's not touching you, you don't react to it. If it's touching you, it's retaliation. You don't have to accept physical contact from anything, right? So if we look at what the dog wants, and we will provide to the dog what the dog really wants, right? Then we are good. And we don't care if the dog likes other dogs, right? So as I mentioned before, like I signed the contract with the dog. If you are next to me, nothing will touch you. Oh, where I was going with it. Like, why physical contact? If we, like fear as an emotion, Mother Nature equipped us with that emotion so we can protect our bodies. There is nothing, behind that feeling than protecting our bodies so we can survive as a species, right? So that's why I draw the line on the sand that physical contact is the difference between reactivity and retaliation. And if I will promise my dog, if you are next to me, nothing will touch you, right? And then nothing will harm you, then we are fine. I don't care if the dog likes other dogs. Right?
Yeah, I know,
so,
but this is...
just to finish the sentence, the same contract we have with other drivers. When you were driving over here, the piece of paint was deciding whether you are safe or not, and whether you would be in high stress or like totally relaxed, right? You had that truck coming, from the opposite direction, and you most likely, you have been comfortable, right? Because like, I'm staying on my lane. The contract with other drivers is like they are staying on their lane, and so we are fine. If I will sign the contract with my dog, if you are next to me, you can see things, but they cannot touch you, even though they might be very close. You are fine, and that has nothing to do with the dog liking or not liking the presence, like the trigger, right? And we can channel arousal into the behavior, because like what the dog, like we are talking about this fight or flight response, right? So asking the dog, and vast majority of the dog trainers, they are trying to do, like ask the dog to do absolutely nothing when they are terrified, which is the hardest thing we can ask the dog for, right? Don't you agree? If you are scared of something, just do nothing is hard. Like if in that room, I know you like snakes. I'm terrified. I'm fucking terrified. Like if in this room there would be a snake, fuck you, I'm gonna be doing nothing. I will try to kill the thing or jump through the window. Fight or flight.
Okay, the problem that we have in real life though, as opposed to setups, in setups, let's go with the snake fear, right? In setups, you can control where the snake is, right? Because that person that's holding the snake can be as far or as close to you as you want. In real life, when you go out into the real world, you don't control where the snake is, right? So if like snake's probably a bad analogy because it doesn't really make a lot of sense, but like you don't control if someone is putting the snake over in your face. And I could be like, oh, well, the snake's not touching you, Alex. You know?
Okay, but yeah, like it's
So you should be
like,
cool with it.
Yeah, and this is the confidence, right?
So,
Because like I want the dog to, for example, reactivity to the other dog. I want the dog to think about them like sharks in the TV screen, or.
but your whole thing, I think, is like, well, if you are able to listen to me, I can take you away from the snake, right? Is that kind of what you're getting at? Like, we can increase distance from the snake, which is ultimately what you want if you're able to
So,
listen.
for example, like vast majority of the reactive dogs, they cannot walk past other dog, right? So in control scenarios, I'm teaching my dog that if you do something, what I'm asking you to do, and sorry, I didn't finish with the arousal thing. Like, why I'm not asking the dog to do nothing, because like the body wants to do thing, right? The same like with the snake, I would like try to fight it or run away. So asking the dog to do nothing and just be relaxed and reward that, that's gonna be hard for the dog. But if I will channel that arousal into the behavior, for example, heel work, right?
Yeah.
The dog has somewhere to channel that arousal in, like in the behavior that will give him distance from the other dogs.
I just don't understand how that's different, though, to what people are already doing. And you said in a minute ago that the thing, it seems like the point of differentiation was like, well, I don't have the same problem that conventional training would have with like real world situations.
So I can bring the dog to very close distance very, very fast. Right? Because, I'm not pushing this arousal down. I will channel that into the behavior that will give the dog relief from the trigger, and then I will reinforce it from me, right?
How is that different when it comes to real world training where you can't control distance as easily?
When
you still have the same problem when you go out for a walk and you can't control how far that person comes to you. Within reason, you can do your best.
Okay,
but
I can bring, if it goes for time, because I'm like, there are two, let me put it this way, there are two approaches, right? You can try to change the feelings to change the behavior, feelings and perceptions to change the behavior, right? And you can start with that. And I think that takes a lot of time, right? Or you can change the behavior and feelings and perceptions to follow. For example, if I would wait to feel good to go to the gym, like I would never go there. But at the beginning, I kind of have to change my behavior, and over time, I'm going to be fine. I'm going to be liking it.
Yeah, right? I know. I just don't think
addressing behavior. So the dog is performing reactive behavior to create a distance.
That's the most important bit, which I think people are going to lose, because the way you're saying it is like, well, how is that different from look at me training? It's just you're doing heel work instead of focusing on you. But it's the negative reinforcement element, the creating of space, that is what is so crucial.
Yeah. Because in setup scenario, I can, for example, at the distance, ask the dog to do any sort of behavior. Like sit is easy for vast majority of the people. But if you are like good trainer, like that can be heel work. And there are good, like a lot of benefits to, teaching the dog to heel, like to walk to heel rather than lose lead, right? But let's not go there like right now. But if I will show the dog like that behavior creates distance as effectively as lunging and barking, the dog will grow confidence in that behavior.
I guess my question is like, how do you manage taking that into the real world versus setups and the unpredictability of that?
Usually, what I do is, like for the first week, it's sort of emotional preparation, right? The dog needs to, like I'm keeping the dog for about a week away from the triggers, right? So I will drive to the woods where the chances I will meet any dogs, they're very, very low. But
you're keeping the cortisol as low as you can.
Yeah. You're like, I just, I'm talking about residential training scenario, right? Then I will do the setup scenarios. Then I will do setup scenarios in a couple locations, then if I can walk past the dog without the reaction, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Then I can live life. I can live life. And later on, I can work on the feelings. So the dog is getting calmer. But right now, like at the beginning, I don't really care about the calmness because I can channel that arousal into, for example, heel work or into sitting. That will provide the dog the distance. And it's it's not that difficult to apply that in everyday life, right? Because like for some time, I'm just walking the dog where the dogs are on the lead and I'm not going to meet like off-lead dogs.
Do you
But later on, let's say my dog is very sociable and I take him literally everywhere. Of course, I'm not going to go to like the busiest park with off-lead dogs because it's unreasonable request to be dog like, very quickly
Sure.
To be fine over there. But I will take the dog to the place where vast majority of the dogs are under control or on the lead. And as long as I can walk past them without the reaction, I'm fine. I can live life.
Do you create the distance when you start switching to those real life situations? Because obviously in the early setups, you can make the dog go away. But once you switch to the real world, well, you can't tell it. Well, I mean, you can, but
like if I will walk past the person,
you're creating the space. Is it? There's a transition.
Like let me put it this way: like the same, like on the road, right? You're driving one way, the other car driving opposite way, right? At some point, you are driving past each other, right? So, if let's say at the closest distance, like I will ask the dog to sit or heel, right? After that, there is a distance, right? So at the beginning, we are doing this other way, and there are a couple of phases like that I have in that training. So at the beginning, the dog has instant reinforcement in the form of distance, and we are doing this in setup scenarios. Then very quickly I can walk past the dog. Then I will work on the duration, so the dog is not getting that reinforcement in the form of the relief instantly, right? Occasionally, you have to wait for it, right? Then I like to go through exaggeration, which I'm making reality boring by, in setup scenarios, bringing it to another level. So, for example, like the dog's barking, running past, etc., etc. As soon as the dog sits, gets the relief, right? Then walking past the Scooby on the pavement is much easier, right? Are
there ever scenarios where you actually create the space by you walking away?
Oh yeah. It's much more. There is much more benefit if you look at this, and when things are moving away. It's like you have the boss that you fucking hate, right? And you are like, it's causing you a lot of stress. When you will feel better about the situation, when you can leave the room, that's fine. Whenever it's like shit goes out, you can leave the room. That's fine. But what about you tell him to leave the room?
Yeah.
Right? What will make you feel better? So in kind of setup scenarios, I want the dog to feel like, if I do like the behavior that I'm being asked for, then we are creating that distance, right? And at some point, that distance will be created on other way, and from then I can walk past the dogs, right? Which is fine. I can live life. Yeah. But on occasion, of course, me removing my dog from the situation would be also the option.
Sometimes you get stuck and you just have to do what you have to do.
But I've been running with the Rottweiler on my hands from the woods, right? So.
I know this podcast has been a little bit derailed largely by me. But I think maybe
you're supposed to be the experienced podcaster here.
I know, but we went down a reactivity rabbit hole and we were supposed to be talking about arousal, but it was too interesting not to do it. Maybe we should just keep going and make this 2 parts.